Blackness, social justice, and a dedication to exploring the various intersections that inform many lived experiences. These offerings have included gender, sexuality, and popular culture, ethical puzzles and moral conflicts, gender, race, and crime, women, literature, and the arts and sacred spaces. And these have all provided a comprehensive and inclusive academic experience. Michelle is NAACP Boulder's fabulous host and content creator for Black Talk, co-creation between the NAACP and KGNU on 88.5 FM. And it's a Black Talk that centers Black voices, thoughts, and vision. During the past academic year, Michelle received the 2023 Boulder Faculty Assembly Excellence in Teaching Award and CU Women Who Make a Difference Award. She has conducted keynotes, moderated numerous sessions throughout her career, including the University of Colorado hosted Conference on World Affairs. Michelle has also facilitated countless workshops on topics including policing, hate crimes, and educational equity. Michelle developed GLU, which stands for Girls Like Us, and it's a program that focuses on Black adolescent girls' mental and emotional health. More specifically, she is a member of a research group that examines the influence and impact of colorism on both the interior and exterior of these girls' lives. Please welcome the moderator today, Michelle Simpson. And nothing to do with divorce.
No. Well, folks, you heard it first. I'm getting a divorce. So everyone can hear me okay? All right, perfect. I wanted to begin by just saying that I am a child of the NAACP. I have spent many hours, numerous hours in rooms like this, coerced, because I was young and my mom was very active in the NAACP and I got dragged to everything. So it's interesting how things come full circle. So here I am, you know, on my own and autonomously with my own agency. But as I said, have spent many hours in candidates forums. The Boulder County NAACP has extended this invitation to each and every one of you, candidates, as well as audience members this evening as a call to action. Okay, a call to really engage in the community in which you live. The NAACP, which is the oldest civil rights organization, goes back to its founding in 1909. And at the core of the NAACP's principles has everything to do with embracing civic engagement. And that's what each and every one of you are doing here tonight, to hear what the candidates have to say, to educate yourselves, to increase your knowledge, deepen your knowledge, or perhaps for the very first time, think about who you might cast your vote for in the Democratic primary scheduled for the 25th of this month. So your presence here suggests to me that you completely embrace this ethos of civic engagement. So we're going to proceed with that understanding. And it is my absolute honor to be here this evening and to be with each of the candidates that we have. We have all 6 candidates. And what I wanted to do is actually begin by asking the candidates to introduce themselves. But the introduction I'm going to ask you to share with us is not your web pages intro or any of your flyers or pamphlets or other campaign materials. Share something with us that we wouldn't know otherwise. I'm not looking for the Inquirer, National Enquirer's headlines, unless you want to, you know, because again, Annette has already divulged my business. So, we'll do it however you'd like, but to share something with us about you that perhaps we might not know otherwise. I've been corrected. We are going to show, okay. So in the process of setting this up, we tried to engage all of the candidates, and we heard from the 6 of you, which is wonderful. But there were 2 candidates who asked us if, in fact, since they weren't able to make it, if we could share their videos with you. So before introductions, so think about what you want to say. Pay attention to the videos. You can multitask. So we'll start with them.
Good afternoon, Boulder NAACP. I'm Elliot Hood, and I'm running for the CU Board of Regents at-large seat. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you today in person, but I've got a conflicting event down in Denver. But I'm really grateful to connect with you over video. Just want to briefly introduce myself and talk about why I'm running and what my main priorities are going to be. So I am a former public school teacher. I'm a former education nonprofit director, and I'm an attorney that represents public school districts across this beautiful state, including super small districts on the Eastern Plains and Western Slope, and also the largest metro area districts as well. As an attorney, I have stood up for anti-racism and DEI policies in court. I have stood up in court to defend gender inclusion policies as well. And during the pandemic, I stood up in court and defended the use of masking and other public health protocols that kept our kids and teachers safe and our schools open. I also have a lot of public and nonprofit board governance experience. So I have the experience between my law practice and my volunteering on boards to hit the ground running as a regent. My big priorities when I'm elected are, number 1, we have got to make CU more affordable. Number 2, we have got to get guns out of our classrooms and ban concealed carry at CU. 3, we need to support collective bargaining rights for all of our workers at CU so that everybody has a voice in the workplace. And 4, we need to push this university to do more on climate, including committing to become carbon neutral. I'm so thrilled to be supported by Democrats across this beautiful state, including so many folks right here in Boulder County. And I would, of course, love to earn your support as well at the June primary. Ballots went out this week, and your chance to vote for the CU Region at Large race. Thanks so much, and it was great to connect with you.
Growing up in Detroit's toughest neighborhoods, it wasn't always easy to dream beyond my childhood circumstances. I was one of 7 children. My parents never got much of a formal high school education, and all of us struggled to find opportunities in a community plagued by violence. The University of Colorado changed all of that for me.
Led by backup quarterback Charles Johnson, Colorado has defeated Notre Dame 10-9.
My friends call you CJ. Can I call you CJ?
That's fine.
I've been around the CU system for over 35 years. I understand CU's strengths and its shortcomings. And one of our biggest shortcomings is who has the access and opportunity to attend CU's 4 campuses and the incredible academic environment they provide. For years, I bused middle school students from poor neighborhoods to CU to plant the idea in their heads that college could be for them too. Adults call that closing the perception gap. The kids just call it having a fun weekend in Boulder watching a football game. But it's not enough. The CU system generates over $17 billion of economic opportunity. We need bold system-wide change if we're going to make CU relevant for Black and brown kids in Northeast Denver, or the sons and daughters of farmers in Eaves, or working families in Pueblo, Colorado Springs, Durango, Grand Junction. I'm running because I believe I can unite people together to solve big problems. Here's what I'm focused on. The rising cost of tuition is vastly outpacing the ability of many of our residents to pay. We have a mental health crisis amongst our students that we must address immediately. And we are failing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know this oh too well because it's what I do for a living. When I look at the CU system, I see the same conversations happening today that I was having in 1988 when I was president of our Black Student Alliance. And finally, none of the things I've talked about will matter much if we don't get ahead of the climate crisis. I'm Charles Johnson. I'm running for CU Regent because it's time we give the University of Colorado system back to Colorado.
Everybody sees that? So now is the moment. We will engage in introductions. Okay, now we will engage in introductions. So why don't we just start to my left, Junie?
Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junie Joseph. I'm the current state representative for House District 10. And you know me as a former city council member as well. But I think part of the question is not to talk about my list of resume, which is on my website and which informs the reason why I'm here. But I remember this work for me started at a very, very young age. I was born in Haiti. And I remember even as a very, very young child, I wanted to work in human rights and in social justice because I had seen so much poverty around me that I knew that was wrong. And I knew that I wanted to do the work. I had seen some of the work the UN had done in Haiti, and I knew I wanted to work for that organization because it was helping disadvantaged people in Haiti. So I set out to do just that. I went to the University of Florida to get a degree in political science, and I got a master's in human rights from York. And I ended up working for the United Nations in Africa and also in Geneva. I've done work at the White House, but all throughout the thread that connected all the work that I have done is this idea when I was a child, that 6-year-old who had seen so much poverty and so much suffering around me that I knew that I wanted to make a difference. When I was living in Africa, actually, I was doing human rights work. And as a human rights officer, I decided that I needed to come back to the United States. And when I came back to see you, this really, really beautiful place. And I see all, again, similar things of what I've seen around the world, I have seen here in Boulder, which is the gap. There's a gap between the wealthy and the poor. And I wanted to be part of that solution. So here I am today, running for re-election, again, based on the idea that everyone should have a seat at the table and everyone needed to be represented. Thank you.
Thank you, Junie. Tina.
Okay, is it working? Okay. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Tina Mew, also running for House District 10. And, you know, when Michelle first said that, I thought, well, I'm just going to share with you this thing that went through my mind, which is something nobody knows about me, which is I used to be a singer when I was in high school. And then the summer between my senior year and CU, I was a singing telegram girl for Eastern Onion, singing telegrams. So, okay, that has nothing to do with anything. But every time someone asks me about a random fact, I like to share that one.
I love that.
Oh.
If you want to sing your answers this evening, feel free.
We'll see how inspired I am.
Okay.
So, and okay, so I'm going to scrap what I was going to say, which is, you know, what we say at doors. Here's my resume. But I do want to talk about what I'm finding as I talk to people in our community. So I have been knocking lots of doors, and I have been serving our community for a long time. I've loved thousands of kids here and worked with, you know, thousands of families here over my time as a middle school science teacher. And I knock a door and someone says to me, "Oh, you were my daughter's science teacher 20 years ago." Or they say, "Oh, I am a para-retiree. Thank you very much for your service." Or, "You are on the board of Planned Parenthood. I love Planned Parenthood. Thank you very much." So it goes fast. I know. So it's just been my honor to live here and be of service to us, and I hope to continue to do that. Thanks, everybody.
And next.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Louder, closer? Okay. Hi, I'm Kathy Gephardt, and I'm running to be your next representative on the State Board of Education for the 2nd Congressional District. And to try to answer Michelle's question, I thought what I would talk about is why I'm here and why my entire political and career has been focused on equity and practice, and decided I wanted to be a civil rights advocate for children. That the voices that weren't heard in the legislature and that weren't heard in the halls of policymakers were the voices of children. So I started a nonprofit law firm called Children's Voices, And I started working with families in the most impoverished parts of the state. So I worked in the San Luis Valley, in the Arkansas Valley, in the school districts of Pueblo and Aurora and Adams 14, because those were the families and the voices that I didn't believe were being heard. I'm not going to go through the long history of the lawsuits that I filed, but I also want to say that while I was on the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education, equity again was my North Star. We made sure that every policy that we enacted was one that ensured equity for all of our students, and one that I'm particularly proud of, actually there's many, but one I'll highlight because it's finances, was we made sure that we had differentiated funding, because with our limited resources, we wanted to make sure that funding went to our neediest schools. And I made sure as I rolled off the board that we had saved enough money to continue that funding so that our neediest students and our neediest kids could have the resources they need. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for hosting, and I will end for now.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Marisol Linda Rodriguez, and I am also running for the State Board of Education. Something you probably don't know about me is that my father, Juan Alejandro Rodriguez, was one of the Peter Pan boys that came over during the Cuban Revolution. And he married Mary Smith, who is sitting here in the audience today from South Carolina, and that's how you have me. So I also was born in Florida, and my mother was a Gator, so go Gators, Junie. A couple things you probably also don't know about me is that when I was a high schooler, I wanted to be the first woman president, and so I went to Washington, D.C. to study at American University. I quickly learned that maybe I didn't want to go into politics and decided to get my master's in nonprofit management. And here I am 20-something years later going into politics. So I guess that whole wanting to be the first woman president thing never quite left me. I do hope we have a first woman president before it could be me. The other thing you may not know about me is that I live in Gun Barrel with my 2 kiddos and my husband, who I just got married to this past summer. We got married up at Lake Wellington with our families camping for a week, so you can imagine how fun that was. The last thing to note is that my in-laws are in town, and they are staunch Republicans, so they are not here tonight. But you might see us on Pearl Street later having some dinner, so please feel free to come up and say hello and distract us from the political conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My name is Judy Amabalite, and this is really high for me. I think I'm just going to stand up because one thing you don't know about me is I'm small. Okay, okay. There it is. Okay, so everybody can hear me? So I wasn't planning to talk about this, but since you asked the question, I want to talk about this building because about 8 years ago, or maybe it was 10 years ago even, I was completely broken by finding out and struggling with my son who has schizoaffective disorder. And one of my sisters, not the one that's here tonight, but another one, said, well, we're going to do this class. It's 12 weeks, every Sunday for 4 hours, put on by the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And so I came to this building for 12 weeks in a row, and I learned about how to have empathy for my own kid, because I was so mad at him for being sick. And I met all these other parents. There were like 12 families in this group, and they were all struggling with that too. And I saw them, they were so angry, and they were so sad, and they were so broken. And together, we moved from this place of despair into understanding and empathy, and then into advocacy. Advocacy for our own family, and advocacy for all the other families. And that is really the root of why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Jovita.
Hi, I'm Jovita Schiffer, hustling with my microphone here. So we're telling secrets? Is that what we're saying?
Jovita, it's up to you.
Kidding. I will share something that that I don't know that many people know about me. You know, running for office is the first thing you have to accept, especially as a woman of color, is vulnerability. Like, you're putting yourself out there. Anything will come out about you, whether you like it or not. So I like to actually lead with any of the things that someone could use against me. And so I haven't seen this come up yet, but someone asked me the other day, what is my education? Where did I get my degree? I don't have a degree. I grew up in poverty in the Bronx, in New York, and by the time I was 18, there were no opportunities for college. The best thing my parents hoped for me was that I would marry a man, because it's very Latino as well, and to have women dependent on men for income. And I went right to work. Actually, I had my first job at 13 and worked ever since. And so I mentioned that because despite the fact that I don't have a traditional education, in my life I have been autodidactic, which means I've self-taught myself in many careers. I've been an HR director. I have written grad courses at CU Boulder on compassion and dignity. I have received funding to lead research with the Renee Crown Institute on racism. And here I am running for Senate. And so one of the reasons I'm running is because there are a lot of people like me that still don't have equity in their 50s, because everyone still makes more money than I do because they have a degree and I don't. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all 6 candidates. Thank you for sharing. I'm a big believer in storytelling because I think at the end of the day, we are our stories. That's what we have. So thank you for sharing yours. Thank you. Okay, let's get into the questions, folks. So I think we would all agree that COVID, the pandemic, affected the education of nearly all children, but it really intensified, spotlighted, if you will, the disparities that exist within the larger culture, and it intensified inequality among students based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. And so the question that I have for you, and you all can read the question as we move along, is how will each of you work to close the achievement gap that the pandemic intensified? And let me just throw in a little caveat. I recognize that we have several candidates who are running for the State Board of Education, got that. But education of our children is an issue that should involve and concern all of us. So this is a question for each of the candidates. And why don't we start with you, Jovita?
This is an interesting question for me, because this is what the work I've been doing for the last 12 years. And I work for BDSD as the Extended Learning and Community Programs Manager, and I run after-school learning centers where we provide support, academic support and interventions and enrichment for children from underserved communities. We also work with parents to try and help them find the resources to help the family thrive. And so this program that I run, we have found that kids get higher grades when they attend. We've had us evaluated, and kids get 10% higher grades, they get better attendance. This is actually a national model for underserved communities to have these additional opportunities for after-school programs, and that is something I've been living and breathing for 12 years, and I will fight for at the Capitol to make sure that every child in Colorado that needs it has it. Thank you.
We'll just come down the line, so you.
Okay, thank you for that. You know, in my 4 years at the Capitol, we have worked a lot on education policy, and education equity. And a lot of it has to do with funding. And I represented, when I first started, Jackson County. And in Jackson County, they have one K-12 school. And it was built in the 60s. And raw sewage runs down the halls from time to time because their plumbing is so broken. And they don't have any money to build a new school there. And so I helped support more funding for the BEST program and for other programs that we have run that say, let us get more money into rural schools and into schools that have less. And this year we changed the school funding formula to make it more equitable, and we also closed we filled the BS factor, the budget stabilization factor. That only takes us to 1989 level of funding, but it's better than being in debt to 1989. So we've done a lot of work, and we've worked on math curriculum and a lot of rural funding. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I'm maybe the only one up here, I'm not sure, that actually lived with kiddos in elementary school through COVID. So we did distance learning, we did shutdowns. I saw the impact on my own children every single day as they were home and never left. But I'm very fortunate. I live here and I have a supportive husband, and I was able to educate my kiddos. So what I know is that the achievement gap got huge, especially for our Black and Brown students. So as a state board member, the biggest tool we have are grants to give to schools and districts that are suffering to help close those achievement gaps. So that's what I would do on the state board. I would say in my personal life, this is what I do every single day. I am in schools talking to students and to teachers and to parents and figuring out what do they need, how can things change, how can we innovate, what differences do we need at different schools. And so those are things I would also allow for at the state board, is that innovation and education to continue to support our children. Last, I would also support pre-K and take some of that best money and give it to pre-K. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I served on the school board during the COVID crisis, and I did have somebody at home, a high school senior, so she got to spend her year during COVID. And so I've experienced it up close and personal. I experienced it as being a school board member, trying to figure out how to keep our kids safe. Thank you, Judy, for mentioning BEST, because that was one of the programs I started that's put $3 billion into facilities across the state. But I would also say I have a slight disagreement with my colleague here, because I don't think grant funding works to solve the problem across for all students. I think we need to advocate for new funding. I was on the state task force that they used my work and the work on the state task force to amend the School Finance Act that we just passed that shows more equity. And so I think we need to look as an entire state at increasing the funding so that we're actually working to help all students. One of the things we're seeing is a huge absence crisis. We're seeing kids not going back to school like they used to. And we need to make sure that we have kids in school so they can actually learn, and that then we can provide the supports and the things that they need to actually get back up to speed. I don't think we're going back pre-pandemic. We got to figure out what the new normal looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina.
So I'm glad Kathy brought up this differentiated funding in Boulder Valley. And I'm proud that that was actually an initiative by the Boulder Valley Education Association, so the teachers union that I was the president of. Because and we brought this to the school board, and then Kathy, under Kathy's leadership, they continued that work. But teachers know that 28 kids in this classroom, in this community, is very different from 28 kids over here where you have kids who are learning to speak English and kids with special needs and kids. And so we did this thing where we tied a factor to each of those characteristics of a student, and then that allowed us to fund these schools differently. And so we have this preferential funding, but I'm really glad that we did that. I also will just say, as Steve Fenberg said, we're all just fighting for scraps here. And the way to make this better, and the way to float all boats, right, is to increase public school education funding in the state. That's the bottom line. Grants, no. We have to increase it for all of our students. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Jeannie.
How do I intend to close the achievement gap? I've been a state legislator for 2 years now, and I was one of the legislators who supported buying down the BS factor. And also 1448 came before the state. That's one of the bill that we just distributed funds so that we can have parity between the rural and urban schools, and I supported that as well. Because again, when we're thinking of equity, we have to think of it as a state. We can't just think of it as just Boulder. Even though in Boulder Valley, we know that we have kids also who are struggling, even though we're much, much more wealthier. But at the same time, we have to ensure that we help our rural schools. As a legislator, I've passed 4 bills in the education space. One of them is to ensure kids stay in school. For instance, to train those who expel kids, because again, we know Black students are disproportionately impacted by school expulsion.
And also, I passed a bill to make sure that kids with disabilities receive legal services. And also, I passed 2 bills in early childhood education as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Junie. So we're going to move to the next question. So there's so many conversations in the larger culture here in Boulder, I know on the CU campus, in regards to equity. And people toss the word around a lot. I'm not certain everyone who uses it has a full understanding or embrace of what the concept actually covers and speaks to. But when we think in terms of perhaps, and it's the last question, but when we look at assuming an equity lens, oftentimes when we're talking about equity, we are really looking at the failure of old policies and practices that keep certain people in place and keep others out. Oftentimes we're talking about deep-seated disparities that remain in place. So plainly stated, equity typically speaks to this idea that we have equitable access to resources, to jobs, and action. It takes some level of action. And many would also argue, and maybe because I'm an ethics professor, that it also requires a moral component. So, part 1 of this question really speaks to whether or not, again, the 6 of you believe we need more people of color representing our community at the state level. And if so, how do we achieve that? So I think all of us here would be interested in your response to that. And part B really speaks to how you square that with the current primary ballot and your place on it. I will begin with, why don't we begin with you, Marisol?
Thank you. So this is a deep question. I think it's aesthetics. Aesthetically you can see a difference, but I don't think that that's what it means, right? At the end of the day, one of the reasons I am running is I would be the only the second person of color on the State Board of Education. It's a pretty homogenous group, and I do think that that matters. My experience matters. I live a different life, right? I live in Gun Barrel. I can't afford to live in Boulder proper. I also come from a line of, sorry, I'm really nervous, so please forgive me.
No, take your time, take your time.
So I just think in all that we do, it is about money, I agree, but it's also about funding the communities and the children that have long been left out of our system. And so my ballot looks a lot like me because that's what I believe, and I don't believe that it just has to be your education or all of your experiences. I do think that equity and diversity matter. So
Thank
I'm
you.
very nervous.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. No, that's okay. Thank you. Thank you. None of this is easy, so thank you. Thank you. Junie.
Oh, thank you. This is a great question. I really like this question because we want to live our values. And as a woman of color, as a woman who studied human rights, who wants to make a difference in the community, I strive each and every day to live that value. And how do I do that is to take action. I was, about a year or 2 years ago, I created the BIPOC training with the Bocodams. And part of the reason why we created that training is so that we can have a community who look like the rest of us. Because at the end of the day, we don't want our leaders to look just one color. We want them to reflect all the colors in our community. And that's exactly why I ran for city council as well. I ran for city council on socioeconomic diversity, on the idea that everyone deserves a seat at the table, regardless of your socioeconomics and your race and your color. So at the end of the day, I strive to mentor Black and brown people as well in the work that I do. And I'm very grateful to have someone like Jovita running for the state senate, because at the end of the day, we need more voices to be included on the ballot and as part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. Kathy.
Yes, thank you for that question. Obviously, I am a white woman sitting up here, but I think it's really important that we live and practice our values, and I think all of us on this board or on this panel share the value that diversity and equity and having people who represent us from different cultures and different colors and different races is very, very important. I can't change who I am, but I can tell you that I've spent my life trying to make sure that we start bridging those gaps so that children have opportunities to be able to maybe be the next female president. I'm not as optimistic it'll happen as quickly as it did in Mexico, but anyway, I think, I just think it's really important, and I will do what I can to continue to live those values and those principles, to hold up everybody in the community so that we can all have the opportunities to serve and to be part of our community. So thank you very much for the question, and I will continue, like I said, to advocate for everybody and to make sure that we all have the same values and the same principles, not the same, but ones that uphold equity and diversity as a very important value for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Tina.
So I'm actually proud of the fact that our legislature in Colorado is pretty diverse. There, about a quarter of our legislature is made up of people of color, and that's a great thing. That's a thing to celebrate. Not to mention that we have, when last I looked, more women in the legislature than we have men. That's a thing to celebrate as well. And this very question is about you know, how do we break down barriers? I have done it in my life through support for things like pathways to teaching, right? Where we encourage people of color to seek careers in public education so that our kids can see people who look like them teaching them, right? I think that's how we do it. I'm proud to have mentored and encouraged our current president of the Boulder Valley Education Association, Patty Delgado, who I just had great faith that we needed a person of color in that leadership role. I've always just tried to elevate you know, people of color and break down barriers to leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Javita.
Thank you. I appreciate this question. First of all, I absolutely believe we need more people of color representing us at the Capitol. That's why I'm running. That's one of the reasons I'm running, and that is one of the things I'm doing about it. So I'm not just running, I'm also talking about how we need more diversity at the Capitol and in other leadership. And I know that others here have mentioned, and I've heard before, that we do need representation from all races and all backgrounds. And we've only had a small amount of representation for people of color for a really long time. And I think one of the things I'm doing, first of all, it was BIPOC Rising that convinced me to run. I also have interns and young people that are interested in running in the future. Stephen is here, Stephen Linares. And he's a young man of color who is now inspired to run, and I will continue to encourage, to mentor, and even work on their campaigns as soon as I win this one, to make sure we bring more people into running. Thank you.
Javita, thank you. Judy.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, of course, I'm sitting here as a white woman, and I also believe we need to encourage diversity and equity in all of what we do. And my work at the Capitol has been focused on bringing equity, a lot of it, to the criminal justice system and to our mental health care system. And I also bring my own unique lived experience to this work that I'm doing. And we all bring our own unique lived experience to the work. And I don't want to apologize for who I am, because who I am is a fierce advocate for the people who are the voiceless, the people whose bodies we are stepping over in the street because we don't have the stomach to support our homeless population and to get people off the street and into care. And once we stop doing that, we will have really lost our moral compass in this country, and that's one of the things that I'm really working hard on.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So the next question really speaks to criminal justice. So Judy, thank you for kind of queuing that up. You know, Black people make up 18% of the prison population in the state of Colorado, but we're only 4% of the population. So this means that Black people in Colorado are incarcerated at 7 times that of their white counterparts. So the question is, how do we go about reducing the practice of over-policing, which combined with unjust prosecution of Black defendants has led to an overrepresentation, not just here in Colorado, but nationwide. But tonight we're talking about Colorado, an overrepresentation of Black people imprisoned in our state. How do we reduce that? How do we go about reducing that population? So why don't we begin with you, Tina?
So in 2020, after the hideous George Floyd treatment, our legislature passed some of the strongest legislation in the country to address this. And I fully support that, and I'm really proud that Colorado did this. So this is legislation that ensured the use of body cameras, the mandated reporting about police behavior and about a variety of things, the nature of certain stops, and it just mandated a lot more oversight. In our own community, the Police Oversight Committee was created, and I'm all for that. So I think that there is an important role for law enforcement. I certainly think that we need more professional development. We need sentencing reform. We need restorative justice. And but I'm not for decriminalizing things. I am for all of the things that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Jovita.
Thank you. I'm torn between giving you a very direct answer on this or sharing my personal concern around this, because we either tell stories or we tell you our technical answers. And so I'm going to go with a story because this is how important it is to me that we work on this and fix it. My nephew in New York has a mental illness, and he is 40, and last year he lost his mom 2 years ago, and last year he lost his dad. But at the time he called me and said, my dad is unresponsive, I don't know what to do. And I had to call the police. And in calling the police from here, calling the police in the Bronx, I was worried about how they would respond to him. And especially if he's distraught, his father is unresponsive. He is, and so I asked them to please go to this house, do a well check. My nephew has a mental illness. Please don't kill my nephew.
Jovita, thank you. Jovita, thank you. Junie?
That's a great question. I was a member, when I was on city council, I was part of the reimagining policing after Zaid Atkinson. If you remember this young Black man who was just speaking trash around his neighborhood, and he was profiled, and the cops was asking him a question, and all he was doing was picking up trash. And ever since, the Boulder City Council has been really trying to do a better job when it comes to community policing. Again, the idea is community policing. We know that policing is necessary, and we can't get, policing is just part of society. So the idea is, how do we create a better relationship and foster a better relationship between community and the police? And that also, again, that requires That's a great question. I was a member, when I was on city council, I was part of the reimagining policing after Zaid Atkinson. If you remember this young Black man who was just speaking trash around his neighborhood, and he was profiled and the cops was asking him question, and all he was doing was picking up trash. And ever since, the Boulder City Council has been really trying to do a better job when it comes to community policing. Again, the idea is community policing. We know that policing is necessary, and we can't get policing is just part of society. So the idea is, how do we create a better relationship and foster better relationship between community and the police? And that also, again, that requires accountability and transparency. This year, one of the bills that came before the state was a bill about prone restraints, and that police departments had to have a process. And I voted yes on this bill. And the idea is there has to be accountability when it comes to police actions. Again, it's a synergetic relationship when it comes to the police and the community. There has to be a better way of doing it. You can't just show up to arrest people every time in their community. You have to build that relationship with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so much for the question. So I have worked a lot on criminal justice reform, and one of the things I think is really important is that we have co-responders and social service responders who go out to people's, respond to calls that aren't the police, that don't escalate the situation, and that can bring resources to bear to help solve that. And that's been incredibly effective in Denver, and it's been very effective in Oregon. And we're starting to do that here in Boulder, and I'm very enthusiastic about those programs, and I have run bills to fund more of that. And then I also ran a bill this session that said you cannot use the term excited delirium. That is a term that is used to identify Black men and say these people are they have superhuman strength, and the only way to deal with that is to restrain them in the most vicious way possible, which is often a prone restraint. And I watched a man die in the Adams County Jail on a video who was, they said he has excited delirium, and then they put him in a prone restraint, and then they all stood around for 30 minutes and watched this man die. And we have to stop doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Kathy.
So not surprisingly, the way I want to answer this question is from a K-12 lens. I can tell you that one of the interactions that students of color often have is with SROs. And then when I was on the school board, we did away with SROs in Boulder Valley School District, and we replaced them with what we called school safety advocates, and it has been a huge success. And then what we needed to do after that was to make sure that our SSAs were actually having the impact that we wanted to make sure. So I changed the metrics so that we were looking at our disproportionate discipline, so we were making sure that our students of color were not being disproportionately disciplined. We've all heard of the school to prison pipeline, and the best thing I think we can do is to interrupt that. And so that's what we were doing in Boulder, was making sure that we were measuring our disproportionate discipline. And then the other thing that I made sure we implemented is a practice that I believe in very strongly, which is circles, to make sure that we are actually addressing the issues. And so that's what we've been doing in Boulder, and we've had huge success in interrupting the school to prison pipeline to make sure that our Black and brown students aren't necessarily going to prison.
Thank you. Marisol.
I actually think, Catherine, my answer is not too far from each other on this one. I also agree. I've done work with SROs up in Poudre School District and saw the struggles the community faced with that. Really heard from our minority communities about how SROs were impacting their students in their schools. And so I know what BBSD did, because my kiddos are now dealing with school safety officers instead. And I also believe the school to prison pipeline really needs to be addressed. So how do we look at that? We look at that by having more teachers of color, right? More relevant curriculum for students to stay in school, to see themselves in school, so that we can stop the school to prison pipeline. So all the other things that have been mentioned are a little outside of the scope of the State Board of Education, but I do admire everyone's answers, and I agree with everyone's approach. The Hoots program in Oregon and the STARS program in Denver have also been wonderful. So knowing that when you have someone show up to a mental health crisis, you have someone there besides a police officer is really important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marisol. Thank you, everyone. You know, some have pointed to sales tax revenue and staging for emergency operations as a reason to keep Boulder's municipal airport open. On the other hand, some would like to close the airport and repurpose that land. We're talking about, 170 over 100, close to 180 acres to build affordable housing. There are those who also live in proximity of the airport who are concerned about both noise as well as air pollution. The FAA has weighed in and has told the city that it can't close the airport without incurring a very high cost due to grants and other things that the city has had access to. Where do you sit when it comes to this debate? Kathy, I'll start with you.
Well, I have to admit this kind of question wasn't out on my radar screen, but I have tried to follow it. And I think what I would say is I always find that there are multiple opinions that you can bring to the table to try to solve a problem like this. And it is clearly a problem that is on the radar of many people, especially those who are advocates for affordable housing, because they see limited land access in Boulder, and they see that as an opportunity to perhaps build affordable housing out on the land out there. So where I stand on it is I actually have to be honest, I need to know more information. I need to understand where the FAA is coming from. I have to understand where the city's coming from. I have to believe that there's an ability there to bring us all together to come up with a reasonable solution to address the needs that the FAA may have. If it's an old contract, that airport's been there. I've lived in Boulder my whole life. It's been there a long time, but we've kind of moved out towards that, needing that land. And so I think there's a way to reach a compromise, but I would need to understand more about the issues before I could speak with any authority on it.
Thank you. Marisol.
Yeah, I would agree with Kathy. This question's not on my radar as a State Board of Ed candidate. But I do understand the issues surrounding affordable housing here in Boulder, and I truly believe that communities know what's best for themselves. And so if the community is asking for this, and this is what the community has said they want, then I think I would be in favor of it. However, I don't know the FAA's position, and I don't know all the ins and outs of this, so I like Kathy, cannot speak truly, honestly about this issue, but I do believe in community and community voice and bringing community to the table around decision making, which is something that is part of my platform and something that I do on a daily basis in my work. So,
thank you. Thank you, Junie.
Yes, this has been a real long issue going on for a while. When I was on the city council, I've heard about the noise complaints from community members. And well, people use the airport for various reasons. There is training happening there, instruction. There's also, it's there for emergency. And I do understand the issue when it comes to noise complaint. We have to do a better job in the air pollutions as well. And I believe myself to be an environmentalist. There's a ballot measure going on at this time, and the community will get the opportunity to weigh in. There are people who want to do away with the airport and put affordable housing, and I'm a staunch supporter of affordable housing. So in essence, again, I think if community members agree to use the airport as a source or mechanism to build more affordable housing, I would definitely support that. But I also understand there are community members who believe that we need the airport for emergency purposes. So hopefully if affordable housing is where the community wants to go, there's still that part, that piece of land that is reserved for emergency services. Thank you.
Thank you. Jovita.
Thank you. I do not know, I have not studied this specific issue well enough to know all of the issues involved. I actually live in Superior, and we also have our airport issues going on and battles and lawsuits, and I can tell you that what I know is that the airport here is causing a major nuisance in noise. People are worried about lead poisoning, and I think also if we were to create more affordable housing to replace the airport, I would be all for it. And I also want to mention that if we close the airport, I also want to make sure that we pay attention to a just transition for people who maybe work there, and make sure that they have other avenues, that we are supporting them with employment, as well as any safety or emergency services that came out of there. How do we replace them? That's it.
Thank you, Jovita. Judy.
I was reaching for the mic before you called on me. Okay, so I guess I have a few different thoughts about the airport. First of all, I think we need more information. We don't know how much it will cost to get out from underneath the FAA. And then I also want to know what specifically are we thinking about building out there. And so I think we have to do a two-phased approach to this thing. The first thing is a study about what does it cost, and the second would be a debate and some kind of consensus around what it is we want to do. And I personally would like to see us create affordable housing, but also ownership opportunity, affordable ownership opportunity, because home ownership can help create generational wealth and is very stabilizing for families. The other thing that I would say is part of this study has to be, if we close the airport in Boulder, do we then put more pressure on the airport that is impacting Superior? Because are all those planes going to move over there, and then their problem is even bigger? And what happens with the planes that are flying from there? Do they come over Boulder? So I think it's complicated and we need more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina.
All right, so honestly, 2 hours ago, I was knocking doors and I met this kid, and he's 19 and he's going to North Dakota University to, study flight. And I said, oh, how do you feel about the airport? And he's like, I hate it. And then he just went off, because that's a kid who learned to fly at our airport. And as a middle school teacher, I don't know, this whole thing makes me a little sad, because I have known a lot of kids who have, learned to fly at the airport. I totally agree with Judy that this needs more study, and I think it should be separated, because if you go on the website and you look at this, then almost everybody who remarks on the get rid of the airport thing, the first thing they say is, I don't like the noise over my house. They don't say, I want affordable housing. That's a separate thing. So I think these things should be separate and considered separately, and I think it might be sort of a false thing that we are jamming them together without enough information. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. So it is estimated that over 28,000 households in Boulder County are housing cost burdened, meaning that they spend over 30% of their income on housing. We know that this impact is most acutely felt by individuals and families of color. 71% of Boulder County voters in 2023 supported the affordable and attainable ballot measure, which goes into effect in January of 2025. What role do you believe government can play in promoting affordable housing? And what role can voters expect you to play when it comes to the issue and the issues surrounding affordable housing? Why don't we begin with you, Marisol?
I feel like I'm going to give a similar answer to the, again, this is a little outside of the purview of the State Board of Education. I do believe in affordable housing. I am a homeowner here, and I'm very fortunate to be so, but as I said, I couldn't afford to live in Boulder, so I had to move out. I think that the role generally that government can play is to help either subsidize or in certain circumstances, I know what's happening out in Gun Barrel is that developers are coming in and they're only putting in so much of a percentage as affordable housing, and then they make plans for one and then they change it and then they take away some of those units. And so really holding developers accountable to making sure that any development is both affordable, but I also would add in not only affordable, but also has solar panels and is addressing our climate issues also, which I'll put out there because I think it's all one and the same.
Thank you. Judy.
we have a housing crisis, and we have to address it. And we have an affordable housing crisis, and we have to address that. And I think it is a matter of statewide concern that we address it. But it is also a matter of local concern that we, maintain a high quality of life in our towns. So last year we ran a bill at the state that was too big and too complicated, and it didn't get through, even though I supported it, and most of it was pretty watered down by the time it got to me. This year I ran the bill that said accessory dwelling units are going to be a use by right in every single family neighborhood, and that is gentle infill. And we worked really hard on this bill. We started in May of last year, as soon as the session ended, talking to all the stakeholders, meeting with cities, meeting with housing advocates, and making sure that we got that policy right. It's not the solution, but it is one thing that will really help create more affordable housing and also build generational wealth. And we also made sure that the incentives in the bill will only go to middle and lower income households.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina.
So I like a couple things here. So I'm a fan of some local control and some community autonomy. So I would like to get rid of this. Well, first I'd like to get rid of the ban on rent stabilization policies. If we want something like that in Boulder, we should be able to do that. I also would like to get rid of the states disallowing real estate transfer tax. So I am really interested in asking the people in our community who benefit and really make a big profit when they sell their homes, are you willing to just give a tiny bit of that windfall to the community to fund affordable housing? So the Boulder Housing Partners, Betsy Martins told me, if it were 1 or 2%, we could fund the whole thing. And so I'm really interested in asking the community about that. I am a fan of the Vienna model, where the government owns 1/3 of the housing and it is permanently affordable. That's what I'd like to see here, but it needs to be permanently affordable, not just left to the whims of the market.
Thank you. Junie.
Yes, look, the state government has a big role to play when it comes to affordable housing and connection with working really closely with local governments. And at the state level, we've done a lot of work in help creating more affordable housing. I sit on the finance committee. I'm the vice chair of finance. One thing that we can do is incentivize more affordable housing. So whenever a developer comes into town and wants to do,
In the end, the state should be partnering and supporting local municipalities in increasing affordable housing.
Thank you, Jovita and Kathy.
I'm afraid my answer might be a little in the weeds, because the way I look at this is I think we want affordable housing. I agree that there's a crisis, but I can tell you that there's also something that I think we need to focus on, which is how we make sure our teachers are able to live in our community. And I served on a task force 2 years ago. The state board actually has some jurisdiction over something called the State Permanent Trust Fund, and we drafted legislation and presented it to the state board to do what's called impact fund investing, so that we could start to actually make housing affordable for teachers so that they could live in the communities in which they teach. That bill didn't get through, but we will continue to advocate for that kind of investing with money that the state already has. It's a small piece, but if we can get teachers to be able to live in their communities with affordable housing, I think we've come a long way towards being able to address that issue. So I will continue to advocate for the use of the state permanent trust fund lands to be used as impact investing, so that we can actually provide housing that's affordable for all of our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to another segment of our program, and we shared some aspects of this with you before we began tonight's forum. So I'm going to ask Tina and Junie to remain, and the four of you to come up, take your seats here, and I'll let you make that move, grab some water or anything else you need. So Tina and Junie, the question I have for you is this. What specific measures will you implement to address environmental justice concerns, particularly and communities of color within House District 10. I will start with you, Tina, because you looked like you were ready to go, so go ahead.
So within House District 10, so I do think, well, I think about climate justice in a variety of ways. So I'll just say, I was talking to someone from our environmental advisory board for the city, and he was talking to me about this really great thing in House District 10 of planting trees and creating shade in areas that they aren't. Because it turns out that our sort of most affluent areas have these big shade trees, and it reduces their electricity costs and it reduces their energy costs. And so there's this impetus in the city to help areas of where low to middle income people live to have this shade. So I think that's I love it because it's just a basic thing in our community. I'm a fan of community choice energy, and so I would push for that in the state of Colorado so that we can all have access, so that people can have access to the kinds of green energy sources that we all want. I mean, it's been shown that when you have competition, communities tend to choose green energy. I also think that we have to look at places like Suncor, where we have energy and people are living in areas of refineries and extraction, and that's creating pollution for our low-income communities, and that is part of climate justice too. So those are all things I'd like to look at.
Thank you, thank you.
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. So as we look at environmental justice and environmental justice concerns, the question speaks to what specific measures will you implement to address environmental justice concerns, particularly in communities of color within House District 10?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I passed about 6 or 7 different bills in the environmental justice space or in the environmental sustainability space. And each and every one of my bills, I think about communities of color and working people as well. And that means, again, ensuring that whatever bill I'm working on, that there is that piece when it comes to working people. For instance, last year, I passed this bill, House Bill 231272, and that bill set aside over $100 million toward EVs and e-bike credits, and also money for other things. But the idea for me, the most important part, was ensuring that community members could get access to the e-bike credits, because ultimately we know a lot of people cannot afford EVs themselves because it's very expensive, but at least they can get an e-bike. And also another bill that I worked on, which was to electrify homes. Again, as you know, a lot of community members, especially in communities of color, there are issues with asthma. In these communities, we want to make sure that our community members have access to electric appliances. So that's one bill that I worked on. This year I worked on a big bill that helped actually to, for organic waste management, to create a statewide system and process. And within that bill itself, I ensured that there are people of color within the board. Again, the work that we do, it has to be in conjunction with people of color. It cannot be that we show up into these communities and tell them what to do. They have to be part of the process, and that's what I tend to be when it comes to my bills, to ensure that community, Black and brown peoples are also part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Junie. All right, we're gonna move seats. I feel like a game show host, but moderator, game show host. So I'd like Kathy and Marisol to trade places with Tina and Junie. You can sit close to me. And just as a reminder, Kathy and Marisol are running for seats on the Colorado State Board of Education. So, okay. Not so easy to move those things. Not a problem. Thank you for doing that. How do you both plan to advocate for curriculum reforms that incorporate diverse perspectives and histories including those of marginalized communities within the Colorado State Board of Education. I was waiting for, because I saw myself read it. Oh, is the question coming out? Uh-huh.
Sorry, that's what I was looking for.
Okay. So the question is, how do you plan to advocate for curriculum reforms that incorporate diverse perspectives and histories, including those of marginalized communities, within the Colorado State Board of Education? So I will start with you.
There's a distinction that I've learned based on my experience between curriculum and standards. Curriculum is actually a local control issue. The state board has jurisdiction over standards. And I have to say I was very grateful to the legislature for telling the state board that they needed to adopt standards that actually incorporated marginalized communities and accurate histories, because we didn't have history standards that actually incorporated those kinds of issues. And we also had the legislature tell the state board that they needed to actually have standards around genocide. So the process is that the legislature tells the state board what the standards are and what they want in legislation, and then the state board actually gets to adopt the standards, and then school districts get to adopt the curriculum. And I can tell you that there was a lot of concern over the social studies standards, because there was concern that the state board was going to adopt standards that were not favorable to LGBTQ or to marginalized communities. And we had the conversation at my board level about whether, since it's a local control issue, would we have to actually comply with what the state board tells us if they actually adopted standards that we didn't like. Fortunately, in a very close vote, the state board did adopt standards that we could somewhat live with, and so we didn't have to go the way of like disobeying what the standards were and adopting our own curriculum. So I would say that at the state board, it's really important to advocate for complete and total factual histories, and making sure that we comply with what the legislature has told us, and make sure that we are actually presenting to our students the history as it actually had occurred, and not this kind of whitewashed history that we were doing before. Sorry to call it that. That's what it felt like to me.
Thank you, Marisol.
Yeah, no, I think Kathy and I are 100% aligned on this. It's something that I've been talking about for a while, is that we need to continue to teach our students the real history, even if the U.S. is not the hero of that story. I have a non-binary child, and so the LGBTQ issue is very real, and it's going on currently, right? Republicans just recently called for all pride flags to be burned. A few weeks ago, they called for the removal of all of their students from public schools. So this is a thing that it maybe doesn't always make Boulder's radar, because we have a really accepting community here, but it is going on in the state, and it's going on even in our congressional district. And so I think having strong advocates on the state board that will make sure that our history is represented, and that marginalized communities, we actually are teaching our students about marginalized communities' histories is really important. So I think Kathy and I are 100% aligned on this issue. It's incredibly, very personal to me, given my own children. So.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, guess what? Time to change. Time to change. Thank you. So we've got Judy and Jovita, both vying for seats, Senate District 18. And the question I have for you is, how do you intend to advocate for policies that expand access to affordable health care and address health care disparities within Senate District 18? I will start with you, Judy.
Okay, thank you for the question. So I think there are a number of things that we are working on that will help expand healthcare, but a lot of that has to do with money and funding. And the thing that I've been particularly interested in is Medicaid, because Medicaid is where the people who are the neediest in our state are accessing their health care. And if you can get on Medicaid and you can stay on Medicaid, it's actually excellent. And my son is on Medicaid, and it has been good. It's been better than my other son's health insurance. But we've put up all these barriers, and with the Medicaid unwind, so many people are being thrown off of Medicaid that literally our clinics like Salud and Clinica are having to reduce staff, even though they have the exact same number of patients. They're no longer able to pay with their Medicaid because they've been thrown off of Medicaid. So that is one of the things that I have been working on all during this interim with the healthcare policy and financing.
Move into that segment. And the questions are specific for specific candidates. So Tina, I'll start with a question that was addressed to you. A recent mailing from you suggests you did not approve of the process used to fill the vacancy. You said, quote, "This time you'll get to vote." How would you recommend we could improve the process?
We can improve the process by having a primary election, which we are doing. So I loved the process, actually. This is the process used in the state, right? So when there is a vacancy, we have a vacancy committee process. So don't misunderstand. I do not question that everything was done correctly in the vacancy committee process. However, to assume that 62 people can determine who represents an entire district for, let's say, 8 years, I don't think that's very democratic. And so the way that we remedy this is we just have a primary. And I am running in the primary to give my community choice and options. And so that's what I think we do. I think that, you know, we have this difficulty in our state house that about a third of the people there were seated through a vacancy committee. And so there are people who are considering how to deal with this, but here in House District 10, we're gonna deal with it with a primary. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is addressed to Kathy and Marisol. Please tell us how long you've been involved in public education. So Marisol, why don't you begin?
Yeah, so I have been doing work in public education for about the last 18 years. So I started out working for a national nonprofit that works in public education. I work for a foundation that works in public education. And then I have owned my own business for the last 12 years, doing work both in, or not both in public education. I also, in the last 5 years, have done some work in climate change and behavioral health, actually where I met Judy, and some other areas, but all in the nonprofit and public education space.
Thank you. Thank you. So Junie, got something for, oh wait, I'm sorry. Please.
Thank you. I've been involved in public education since, and I will show my age here, since the mid-1990s. I started working pro bono in Fort Morgan, working with families that had come to work in the plant out there that weren't getting the services that they needed from the school district. And so I've been working in public education as an attorney. As I said in my opening statements, I started my own nonprofit Children's Voices law firm because I wanted to work in public education and hold up the voices of those who didn't have voices at the Capitol and in education. So I have been working in public education, representing all students and working for the opportunities for all students since the mid-1990s, and I will continue to do that. That's why I'm running for this seat. So I think that it's really important that I can explain my experience. And one thing I did want to say, I have 15 seconds left, is I don't like to talk about the achievement gap, and I meant to say that. That identifies children as failing. I like to think of it as opportunity gaps and things that we can work on as a society, and that's what I have been doing my entire career, and that's what I will continue to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Management. Do you support home rule in cities like Boulder, or should the state decide things like occupancy limits?
Thank you for this question. I was on city council for 4 years, so I understand the importance of home rules and local control. I was actually on the policy committee of the Colorado Municipal League, which is an organization that represents communities, both towns and cities, at the state capitol. They fight really hard when it comes to local control, and I fully support local control. But I think part of the question that you asked me, and I want to be transparent in answering this question, that the state has a big role to play when it comes to land use, because here in Boulder, we're doing the work. We're doing a lot of work to provide affordable housing, but there are communities around the state of Colorado that say they don't need housing they don't have a homelessness problem. That means Boulder actually bear the brunt of homelessness and ensuring that community members have access to affordable housing. So the land use policies that we pass at the state level, a lot of them are for other communities that refuse to make any changes. Thank you.
Okay, next question is for Judy and Javita. Would you support creating multi-member districts, combining a few existing districts, and using a multi-winner proportional voting method in order to achieve a delegation that proportionally reflects the will of the electorate? Would you like me to repeat that? Okay, because I feel like I need to. Would you support creating multi-member districts, combining a few existing districts, and using a multi-winner proportional voting method in order to achieve a delegation that proportionally reflects the will of the electorate? So why don't we start with you, Judy?
Okay, thank you. So I will say, I don't know, because we would really have to spend some time studying that, and I haven't done that work. I think it would be interesting to try to figure out how we're going to combine these districts and what districts we're going to combine, and that work would have to be very carefully done. But this topic of changing the way we run our elections is top of mind, because today the governor signed a bill that is going, so we're going to have ballot measures that are designed to get rid of caucus and assembly, to have a jumble primary where all parties are running on the same primary ballot. The top 4 vote getters will go to the general election, and that will be a ranked choice voting election. And the legislature ran a bill this session that said if that ballot measure passes, then it won't go into effect for at least another 4 or 5 years, because we want to make sure that we make this change carefully and give the clerks plenty of time to respond. So that is something that's happening today. Those ballot measures will be on your ballot, and that law that we passed, it did get signed by the governor, but with a caveat that we take a look at that as a legislature when we reconvene.
Thank you. Javita?
Yeah, the question that you ask and the system you describe absolutely needs more study to see how it would work and how it would impact our community. That said, I do like the idea of ranked choice voting. The things that Judy also mentioned. What I learned running as a woman of color for the Democratic Party in a primary is we need a lot of work. We have a long way to go before we have really, truly inclusive processes, because the caucus and the assembly process was not inclusive of all community members to participate in. So they had 200 people voting on who was going to be on the ballot, representing 108,000 voters. And so I'm glad to hear that we are moving towards change, because change is needed if we truly want diversity and inclusivity and more people of color to run. Others would have quit by now if they had experienced the things I've experienced, but I won't. It makes me just want to run harder, because you need me to run. Thank you.
Thank you. This is for each and every one of you. Can you address where most of the funding you've received for this primary came from? I will begin with you, Nancy. Why don't we begin with you? Not Nancy. Kathy. I'm sorry. You look like a Nancy, but you're Kathy.
You're getting divorced, so you can.
I'm doing my best, people. I'm doing my best. Kathy. And Kathy's looking at me like she's looking at me, but that's not my name. And you're right. Is your middle name Nancy? I gave it a shot. Kathy.
I'm running a very strong grassroots campaign that I'm very proud of. If you look at my the people who have donated to me on my Tracer account, you will see that I have teachers and community members donating $15 and $20 to my campaign, and that is what I'm most proud of. Is that it is a very grassroots campaign. They call it retail politics, I guess. It's because I am out. I've been in every community in the second CD, meeting with voters, and the part I hate most about running for an election is actually the money part. And I'll also say, because I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that, it's not directly responsive to this question, and I will just say one sentence about it, which is, I hate the role that dark money is playing in all of our campaigns. I think we should all be running on our qualifications, and we should all be running on what our local donations are, so that we can actually have a legitimate upfront conversation and not be influenced by what's coming in from outside corporate forces. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, not Nancy. Okay. Marisol.
So I got into this race very late. I got in at the end of February. And in order to get on the ballot, I had a similar experience to Jovita. So I ended up going out and getting over 3,200 signatures. My husband and my kids and I stood in front of Lucky's Market and Whole Foods and the library for hours and hours and hours and got signatures to get on the ballot. My funding for my campaign is very similar to that. I have, as of today, 211 people have donated to my campaign. My father, who is poor as anything, is one of my largest contributors, and my smallest contributor was a $10 donation from a woman I went to high school with that I'm still friends on Facebook with. So I have gone near and wide. I have worked across the country and I've lived across the country, so you will see donations across the country. Many of them with the last name Rodriguez are my family, or Smith is my other side. And so I really have just gone out to the people I've known throughout my entire life and said, please give to me. And so that's how I'm funding my campaign.
Thank you. Jeannie.
Yes, I have received a lot of funding from community members mostly. I know that a friend of mine was looking at my tracer and how much money that I've raised from Boulder. I think about 40 something thousand dollars of the money that I've received are from Boulder, and I've received more than 500 small donations. And what else do I want to say? I've received money from unions as well. They support me. And I've received a $1 donation from somebody, and it costs $10 actually to get that $1 donation from Tracer. But it's good to see that as well. I'm running a grassroots campaign throughout. When I was petitioning, I had 100 people went out door knocking for me to get signatures. So I know this race is not about money, it's about votes, and I hope that community members will show up and vote for me regardless of the amount of money that I have in the bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy.
Thank you. So I don't do things in half measure. And when I decided to run for this seat, I started raising money because I didn't take a class on how to run, but I understand one of the things they teach you is you got to raise a bunch of money if you want to win. And so I have been working night and day, raising money, meeting with people, knocking doors, having fundraisers, making calls, and doing the work to win. And part of that is raising money, and I'm not embarrassed, but I have raised more money than any other state candidate for state House or Senate. And it didn't just come to me. I worked really hard to raise this money. And I have a broad coalition of support. So I also have gotten money from the unions, AFL, SEIU, many of this BVEA, the Boulder Valley Education Association. I have also gotten a check for $450 from the Colorado Chamber and from other organizations like that. And they are giving me money because they know that I will be a great senator and that I will listen to all voices and that I will pay attention to their concerns.
Thank you. Tina.
So, like everybody said, I have, I think it's over 200 and something individual donors, like 250 individual donors. Most of them are people who are in our community. By far, most of them are people who are in Colorado. I'm really proud to have the support of the Boulder Valley Education Association. So, of course, those are my teaching colleagues, and their faith in me is just fantastic. I also have the support of the Colorado Medical Society, and I'm actually really proud of that too. My mom was a nurse growing up. I have done a lot of work for Planned Parenthood for reproductive health care specifically, but healthcare access. And so I understand the I understand the importance of physicians, and so I'm happy to have that support too. Yeah, okay, I'm out of time, but yes, mainly grassroots and some big donors who support me too. Okay, thank you.
Jovita, no. Jovita.
So I too have been running a grassroots campaign. My first donation was from my dad, which I'm really proud of. He's going to be 96 this summer, and I always think he's one of the reasons I'm running, because I really want to change the future to be better than the life he led as a man, as a Black man. And so my money comes from community members, from people from parties, people I've met, people I've called, and also from some state legislators and some senators and some elected officials in Boulder. And so these are people I've met along the way who are supporting my run because they believe in the work I can do and the changes that I can help make. And I also, one of the things that really worried me in learning about campaigning and money and endorsements is, what will I owe you if I take your money? What will I owe you what if you are a landlord and I pass bills that don't necessarily work for landlords? That's the kind of thing I think about, and I'd rather, the other thing is I have people power. I have so many people behind me, and that is what, that's what I'm grateful for every day. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so for Kathy and Marisol. Did I leave anybody out? Oh, okay. I see both of you have been endorsed by powerful people. Kathy by, I think about this, Congressman Neguse, and Marisol by Governor Polis. Were either of you approached and encouraged to run by either of these powerful voices? Were either of you promised any financial support by the governor or congressman for your campaign? Marisol, why don't we start with you?
Sure, yes. I'm incredibly honored to have been endorsed by Governor Polis. I was also endorsed by the person who currently holds this seat, Angelica Schroeder, and the State Board of Ed's chair. So I'm really proud of the endorsements. If you go to my endorsements page, you'll also see a wide range of people of color, which was also really important to me. So the question was I? No. So Governor Polis called me when he heard that I was interested in running and was really excited about my campaign, which was really flattering. But he has not promised to fund my campaign. He has not promised me any money. Governor Polis is not on my donor base. So if that's the question, I think that's how I would answer it.
Okay, thank you.
I can't tell you how honored I am to have Congressman Joe Neguse's endorsement. In fact, that was the first person that I asked before I decided to run, whether Congressman Neguse would be willing to support me, because I have followed his career. I've known him since he started working for Andrew Romanoff. And so I was very, very honored to have his support. I did ask Governor Polis if he would meet with me, and he would not. So I don't know how to answer that question. I've clearly not been promised anything by him. I wish that I could have had a conversation about my positions and what I stand for. So I've also been endorsed by a whole host of people who are, including President Benberg and the Speaker McCluskey, and thank you very much, Judy Amabile, mayors and county commissioners. You can go to my website and see all of the people who have endorsed me, and not one of them has asked me for anything in return. They've endorsed me because they believe in me, they understand that I have proven results, and that I will do what I stand for. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Well, it looks like we're getting close to time, and so got a question for all of you, each of you, kind of our final question, and let's take a minute with that. So the question is, what is it that you hope the folks in this room take away? So when we think about Eugenia, Junie.
You look like a Gina.
Well, Junie, and that started this with the divorce. But okay, so we have Junie, we have Tina, and we have Kathy. I will never forget. Marisol, Judy, and Jovita. So the question is, what is it that you hope we have gleaned from this discussion tonight, your responses to questions, or maybe we haven't asked a question that really speaks to what it is you hope we embrace about you, your candidacy. Okay, so why don't we begin with you, Jovita? We're going to come this way. So Jovita, what is that thing, and maybe it's things, you may have to speak fast if it's things, but what are those things that you hope we take away?
Well, I think people here, most of you probably care about the values that NAACP stands for. Many people here talk about diversity, talk about needing more people of color in leadership, talk about more inclusivity, and I think that I'm an opportunity for that. And I absolutely am not only qualified, but I have the heart and passion to fight for the things that everyone needs. And I'm not going to just represent people of color, I'm going to represent everyone. And so that's what I would like you to take with you. And thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Jovita. Thank you very much. Judy.
Okay, thank you. So I guess what I hope you all will take away is that I have spent the last 4 years, this has been my passion. This has been my whole life. And I have worked really hard to deliver results for my constituents. And I want to go back to the state senate and continue to do this work. And the work that I am doing is really important to the least among us. And I have focused on that population. I am working on homelessness, I'm working on mental health, I am working on criminal justice, I am working on climate justice. And I hope that you will see that I have been a champion at the State House, and I have been effective. I know how to work with people. I know how to bring people together. I reach across the aisle whenever I can. And I have earned the respect of so many of my peers, and I hope you'll check out my endorsements too, and also very honored to have the endorsement of Joe Neguse and so many others. And I hope you all will consider voting for me.
Thank you, Judy. Marisol.
Yeah, I think what I'd like you all to take away tonight is, look, I'm new to this. This is my first forum I have ever been part of. I have not been part of a debate. I decided to jump in the race because I realized that no one on the State Board of Education still has children in our K-12 education system. We have no one that is representing students that are still in school. Mine are. I have a son with special needs and an oldest child that's come out as non-binary. These issues are really important to me. I'm not going to say everything right. I'm going to get nervous and I'm going to get flustered because I'm new to this. But I think that that's what makes me a uniquely posed candidate. I think that's why Governor Polis chose me. Not chose me, that's the wrong word, but chose me to endorse is what I should say, excuse me. Yeah, not going to say everything right. Is because this voice matters. A voice of a woman of color, a woman that's representing children, a woman that is in schools every single day. And so that's why I hope you take a chance on me, because I do think it's time that my voice and someone like me is represented on the State Board of Education.
Thank you, Marisol. I'm not going to say it. Kathy.
Thank you for adding levity to this. I think it's really helped, whether it was intentional or not. Anyway, I hope what you can take away is a couple of things. One, I too am a mom. I am a mom of 5 kids who've gone through the schools, and I've experienced everything from preschool through transition services because one of my children was neurodiverse and was on an IEP. So I have seen the full scope. When I was on the school board, I visited every school. I made it a policy to follow the superintendent around. We went and visited every school, every elementary school, every middle school to listen to teachers to find out what was going on. So I know what's going on in our schools. I have traveled all over the state. The other thing you don't know is that I've been endorsed by the CEA, which is the Colorado Education Association. I am the teacher's choice for this. And I've been endorsed by the local education organizations. I have been endorsed by the Colorado Association of School Executives. So all the principals and superintendents and HR directors are endorsing me. So I am the choice of the education community. I am the choice of the people who you entrust your children to every day. And I hope that that will be enough for you to vote for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Tina.
I think that what wasn't asked here is what have you done for marginalized community? What have you done for our HD10 marginalized community and marginalized communities in Colorado? And I'd like to just say that it has been my great honor to work with many, many families. So I worked in a school that's about a third free and reduced lunch, and that tracks closely here with our Latino population. So kid by kid, family by family, I've been working to break down barriers and make sure that all of those kids have access to opportunity. And then I'll also point out that I, as a leader in Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, that organization is all about making sure that women of color particularly, and all of our low-income people around the state have access to non-judgmental health care. I have been fighting for that in the state of Colorado and in this region. And so my life's work and my passions have been about knocking down barriers to access. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Junie.
Well, thank you. What is it that I want you to know? I want you to know that I am a very passionate person when it comes to serving you. This job is about service for me. That's what it has always been about. Again, I mentioned to you that I started from a very young age that I knew this is the work that I wanted to do. It's not about the badge, it's not about where I'm doing the work, it's about doing the work. I have served you with honor over the last 6 years since I've been doing this work as your city council member, as your state representative. I made promises to you when I ran for city council that I would lead with empathy, with humanity, and I have done that. And just know that I will continue to serve you with kindness, with doing a good job. And there was this idea of endorsements. I really believe the endorsements that matters is your vote. That's the only endorsement that matters to me. For as long as you're by my side, I will continue to do the work. I made promises to you and I intend to keep them to you, and I have kept them to you by passing those 36 bills that I did. Please vote for Junie Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, before we close out officially, I just want to share a story with you. So I'm kind of coming full circle, because I mentioned at the top of this forum that I believe our stories are what we have at the end of the day, to share with one another, to share with our children, that really tell us who we are. Both of my parents were born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama. And when I think about just the work, the struggle they had to go through in order to vote, in order to do something everybody in this room is likely to have an opportunity to do on the 25th of June. I think about my grandmother, Mosetta Allen, who tried to register to vote 4 times, was turned away each before. On the first time, she was asked to recite the Constitution. And I wonder how many of you can recite the Constitution by heart. Maybe you can. My grandmother reached the 3rd grade. She wasn't able to do that. The second time she came, they asked her to count the number of pennies in a large kind of mayonnaise jar. And not count them one by one, but to give a count of how many were in there. She took a guess, she was wrong. She was sent away again. The third time, since she had difficulty reading some of the instructions, they said again she wasn't qualified. And the 4th time, they said, we're so tired of you. Go ahead and sign the card. You're registered to vote. But I share that with you because I think so often we take our vote for granted. And I started, again, the forum by just appreciating each and every one of you for coming out, for taking this whole concept of civic engagement seriously. Because again, I'm guessing you wouldn't have been here for 2 hours just for the heck of it. Well, maybe you would, you know, because I'm kind of hilarious, but maybe not. But maybe not. But it's my hope you vote seriously, that you take into consideration what you've heard, because there's nothing easy about this. There's nothing easy about being up here, asking for your vote, your support, and essentially your trust. What I'd also like to do as we start to close out this evening, I'd like to ask anyone who is a member of the NAACP who can stand to stand. The NAACP is our host tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. I'd also like to ask those who made this evening possible to stand for a little applause. These things don't happen magically. They take the effort of a whole host of people and a whole host of people who live with those people, who have to kind of deal with it all. So we also want to thank them. Once again, I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for being here this evening. You could be doing many things. I don't even want to hear about them. Don't want to know. But you could be doing so many other things, and you decided to come and join this forum. And again, I'd like to thank Javita, Judy, Marisol, Kathy, Tina, as well as Judy. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Thank you.